Imagine someone holding power over a story for so long that everyone around them slowly forgot there was another version of the truth. Imagine one person standing in the middle of confusion, smiling while secretly pulling strings, believing no one would ever notice the way their words created distance, doubt, and emotional chaos. That is exactly what is being exposed around your soulmate right now. They are not just discovering a small lie, they are beginning to see the entire pattern behind it. And listen carefully, because this is where the truth becomes impossible to ignore. The third party thought they could keep hiding behind charm, excuses, half-truths, and emotional performance, but something has shifted. Something has reversed. The same energy that once kept your soulmate trapped in confusion is now beginning to break apart right in front of them. At first, your soulmate did not want to believe what they were seeing. Their mind searched for another explanation, because accepting this revelation meant admitting that someone they trusted may have been creating problems on purpose. They wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding. They wanted to believe the tension, the silence, the separation, and the emotional distance happened naturally. But what they discovered next changed everything. A detail came forward. A conversation sounded different. A memory returned with new meaning. Suddenly, the third party's version of events did not feel stable anymore. It felt rehearsed. It felt too convenient. It felt like something designed to make your soulmate question you, instead of questioning the person standing closest to the confusion. And your heart needs this right now, because the most shocking part is not only that the third party is being exposed. It is that your soulmate is realizing how deeply that outside influence affected the way they saw you. They are beginning to understand that their doubts were not always born from truth. Some of those doubts were planted. Some of those fears were encouraged. Some of those assumptions were quietly fed until they started looking like facts. That realization is shaking them, because they can no longer separate what they felt from what they were influenced to believe. The chain is breaking now. The illusion is weakening. And as your soulmate looks closer, they are starting to see that the connection was never the real trap. The trap was the lie that convinced them to run from it. And now, look at the symbolism sitting in this energy. The Ten of Swords reversed is not quiet. It is not soft. It is the moment after something painful has already happened. But the truth is finally rising out of the wound. This is not about guessing the future. This is about seeing the psychology of betrayal after someone has been pinned down by a story that was never fully honest. Upright, those swords would speak of an ending, a painful collapse. A moment where someone feels defeated by what they could not stop. But reversed, those swords are no longer staying buried in the same place. They are lifting, they are loosening. Something that once looked final is being questioned. And that is exactly what your soulmate is experiencing right now. They are replaying old conversations. But this time they are not listening with the same ears. They are beginning to hear the pauses. They are beginning to notice the way certain words were repeated too often, almost like someone had practiced them. They are beginning to see how every time their heart softened toward you, something from the outside came in to harden them again. A comment, a warning, a sudden emotional crisis. A dramatic shift in energy that pulled their attention away from what they already knew deep down. And listen, because this is where it gets heavier. Your soulmate is realizing the third party did not always have to attack you directly to damage the connection. Sometimes all they had to do was change the atmosphere. Sometimes all they had to do was create enough doubt for your soulmate to hesitate. Sometimes all they had to do was speak with concern, act wounded, or make themselves look like the only person who truly understood the situation. And because your soulmate was already confused, because they were already emotionally overwhelmed, They absorbed that influence without realizing how deeply it was shaping their perception. But now, those swords are reversing. The pressure is coming off. The story is turning over. What once looked like proof against you is starting to look like evidence against the third party. Your soulmate can no longer ignore the timing. They can no longer ignore how certain problems appeared right when peace was possible. They can no longer ignore how the third party always seemed to know exactly when to step in. And the mistake they made was simple. They repeated the pattern one too many times. And that pattern is exactly what the Ten of Pentacles reversed is showing here. Not as a prediction, but as a symbol of a structure that looked secure from the outside, while something underneath was already unstable. Because this card, in this position, speaks to the kind of influence that hides inside loyalty, history, shared spaces, family energy, or familiar comfort. It is the person who says, "I know what is best," while quietly making sure no one else gets close enough to challenge their place. And your soulmate is starting to see that now. They are beginning to understand that the third party did not just repeat words. They repeated a role. Every time your soulmate got too close to clarity, the third party stepped back into that role. The concerned one, the wounded one, the misunderstood one. The one who somehow always needed reassurance, right when your soulmate was about to question something deeper. And for a long time, it worked, because your soulmate thought they were responding to emotion. They did not realize they were responding to a strategy. That is the first real crack in the control. Your soulmate is not only remembering what was said, they are watching how it was said. They are remembering the timing. They are remembering how guilt appeared whenever accountability got too close. They are remembering how the third party suddenly became fragile when your soulmate started asking direct questions. They are remembering how charm returned. The moment suspicion entered the room, like someone quickly changing masks before the lights came on. And listen carefully, because this is why the revelation feels so shocking to them. The third party became too comfortable. They thought the same performance would keep working forever. They thought, if they acted hurt enough, your soulmate would stop investigating. They thought if they sounded loving enough, your soulmate would confuse control with care. They thought if they kept presenting themselves as the stable one, the loyal one, the one who had been there, your soulmate would never notice how much instability followed them everywhere they went. But now the illusion is not holding. The reverse Ten of Pentacles shows the collapse of a false foundation, the kind of foundation built on appearance instead of truth. Something that looked solid is starting to feel hollow. Something that looked loyal is starting to feel possessive. Something that looked protective is starting to feel like a cage. And your soulmate can feel it. They are no longer just listening to the third party's explanations. They are watching the body language. They are watching the panic behind the softness. They are watching how quickly the energy changes when one simple question is asked. Because what disturbed your soulmate most was not the lie itself. It was the way the third party reacted when they were finally questioned. Because the moment that question entered the room, the energy changed. And this Temperance card is important here, not as fortune-telling, but as a symbol of balance, emotional control. And what happens when someone who has been mixing a story for too long suddenly loses control of the ingredients? Temperance speaks to blending, adjusting, pouring one thing into another, trying to make two different realities look like one smooth truth. And that is what the third party had been doing. They were mixing concern with control, mixing affection with pressure, mixing truth with just enough distortion to make your soulmate doubt what their own heart already recognized. But under pressure, that balance slipped. At first, they may have tried to laugh it off. They may have made it seem small, like your soulmate was taking things too seriously. like the question itself was ridiculous. And your soulmate noticed that. They noticed the quick smile that did not reach the eyes. They noticed the sudden shift in tone. They noticed how fast the third party tried to move the conversation away from the one place where truth was beginning to breathe. Because innocent energy does not panic when truth enters the room. Innocent energy may be confused. It may be hurt. It may want clarity. But it does not scramble to control the direction of every sentence. And then came the offense, the wounded performance. The way the third party acted as if being questioned was the real betrayal. Suddenly, your soulmate was no longer asking about a detail. They were being made to feel guilty for asking at all. And that is where something clicked. Because this was not new. This was the same pattern in a different outfit. The same emotional pressure. The same attempt to make your soulmate abandon their own perception. The same person who once made them doubt you was now trying to make them doubt themselves. And listen, that comparison is heavy. Your soulmate is silently remembering how you were treated when you asked for honesty. How you were made to seem too emotional, too sensitive, too difficult, too suspicious. And now they are seeing the third party use that same energy on them. The same redirection, the same defensiveness, the same quiet punishment for getting too close to the truth. Temperance shows the moment where imbalance can no longer be hidden behind calmness. The cups are still being held, but the hands are not as steady as they used to be. The image may look peaceful, but underneath it, something is being exposed. Someone tried to control the emotional mixture, but they poured too much. They revealed too much. They adjusted the story one too many times. And now your soulmate is realizing something even more unsettling. The third party may not have guessed their weaknesses. They may have studied them. And that is why this Six of Pentacles reversed carries such a heavy meaning in this part of the story. Not as fortune-telling, not as a promise, but as a symbol of uneven exchange, emotional imbalance, and help that was never truly free. Because when this energy is reversed, it can show someone giving with one hand while quietly taking with the other. Someone offering support, advice, comfort, or protection, but expecting control in return. And that is what your soulmate is starting to recognize. The third party may have looked generous with their concern. They may have looked like the one who was only trying to help. They may have positioned themselves as the safe place, the wise voice, the person who could see what your soulmate supposedly could not see. But underneath that, something was not balanced. Something was not pure. Their guidance came with an invisible price. And the price was your soulmate's distance from you. This is where the revelation becomes painful. Because your soulmate is beginning to see how their weakest moments were quietly used. When they were afraid of being hurt, the third party knew exactly how to speak to that fear. When they were uncertain, the third party knew exactly how to make uncertainty feel like intuition. When they were missing you, the third party knew exactly how to turn that longing into suspicion. They did not always come in with aggression. Sometimes they came in softly. Sometimes they sounded caring. Sometimes they sounded protective. That is what made it so hard to detect. They may have said things that sounded harmless on the surface. Are you sure you can trust them? Maybe you are only seeing what you want to see. I just do not want you to get hurt. And those words, spoken at the right moment, landed deeper than they should have. Because your soulmate was already standing in an emotional place where one small suggestion could change the direction of their thoughts. One carefully placed doubt could turn love into fear. One quiet warning could make your soulmate step back from something their heart was still reaching for. And now they are seeing the imbalance. They are seeing how the third party gave comfort only when it kept them dependent. They are seeing how support became influence. They are seeing how concern became a leash. And your soulmate can no longer pretend that this was just someone caring too much. Caring does not require control. Protection does not need manipulation. Real love does not make someone smaller so it can remain important. The third party knew where to press, because they knew what your soulmate feared losing. And now your soulmate is starting to understand something painful. The third party was not trying to protect them from heartbreak. They were trying to protect their own position, and that is why the Page of Swords is standing here with such sharp symbolism. Not as a prediction, not as someone spying into the future, but as the psychological image of someone finally watching closely, finally asking sharper questions, finally refusing to accept a story just because it is being handed to them with confidence. The Page of Swords is not loud power. It is alertness. It is the mind waking up. It is the moment someone stops being emotionally pushed around and starts noticing every detail they were once too overwhelmed to question. And your soulmate is in that energy now. They are listening differently. They are watching differently. They are no longer taking the third party's words as automatic truth. And that is dangerous for the person who needed confusion to stay powerful. Because the third party's control did not survive through honesty. It survived through your soulmate not looking too closely. It survived through emotional pressure, timing, and distraction. It survived because your soulmate kept giving them the benefit of the doubt, while questioning the very connection that was actually waking them up. And this is the hidden motive that is becoming clearer. The third party saw what your connection did to your soulmate. They saw how your presence made them think deeper, feel deeper, question old patterns. They saw how being connected to you made your soulmate more honest with themselves, and that was a threat. Not because you did anything wrong. Not because your energy was chaotic, but because truth has a way of making control uncomfortable. The third party did not just fear losing attention. They feared losing influence. They feared losing the ability to shape what your soulmate believed. They feared the moment your soulmate would stop running every emotion through their approval. They feared the moment your soulmate would trust their own heart more than the outside voice that had been guiding them away from you. And once that fear entered the third party, their behavior started becoming more obvious. That is why the Page of Swords matters here. This is your soulmate beginning to see the strategy behind the words. They are noticing how the third party asked questions that were not really questions. Questions designed to plant suspicion. Questions designed to make your soulmate defend distance. Questions that sounded curious, but carried a hidden blade underneath them. And now your soulmate is asking questions of their own. They are asking why peace with you always seemed to trigger panic in someone else. They are asking why the third party needed so much access to their thoughts. They are asking why the person who claimed to protect them always seemed more comfortable when they were confused. And the question they avoided for so long is finally rising. What if the person I defended was the person causing the damage? And that question does not leave your soulmate alone. It keeps echoing underneath everything. It follows them into quiet moments. It rises when they remember your face, your words, your silence, the way things changed after someone else stepped in. And this Two of Cups reversed is speaking directly into that emotional reckoning, not as fortune-telling, but as a symbol of disconnection, misunderstanding, and a bond that was pulled out of alignment by something that did not belong between two people. Because the Two of Cups upright would speak of mutual recognition, emotional exchange, two hearts meeting each other with honesty. But reversed, it shows what happens when the flow is interrupted. When two people who were meant to understand each other begin looking at each other through distortion. When love is still present, but the reflection becomes warped. And that is what your soulmate is sitting with now. They are realizing the distance may not have come from the absence of feeling. It may have come from the presence of interference. And that is a painful realization. Because part of them wants to defend the old story. Part of them wants to believe they had good reasons for pulling away. Part of them wants to believe they were protecting themselves, making the right choice, seeing clearly. But another part of them knows. Another part of them feels the truth pressing through the denial. Another part of them is remembering how often their heart moved toward you before someone else's voice pulled them back into fear. And listen, this does not erase their responsibility. This does not make every choice disappear. Your soulmate still has to face the fact that they listened. They doubted. They allowed someone else's version of you to become louder than your actual presence. They allowed suspicion to sit where trust should have been. They allowed confusion to speak over the part of them that knew there was something real here. That is why this feels so heavy inside them. The truth is not only exposing the third party. It is exposing the places inside your soulmate where they abandoned their own knowing. It is showing them how pride can dress itself up as caution, how fear can call itself wisdom, how outside influence can sound like guidance when someone is already scared to feel too deeply. And now the Two of Cups reversed becomes a mirror. It shows them the connection turned upside down, not because the connection had no meaning, but because someone helped twist the meaning until love looked unsafe. And the next thing your soulmate notices is even more disturbing. The third party's timing was never accidental, and that is where the Emperor enters this story with a very serious kind of symbolism. Not as fortune-telling, not as a prediction, but as the image of control, structure, authority, and the person who wants to sit in the seat where every decision has to pass through them first. The Emperor can represent stability when it is healthy, but in this energy, it is showing your soulmate the difference between real protection and control disguised as protection. Because the third party wanted to be the authority over the story. They wanted to decide what was safe, what was dangerous, who could be trusted, and what your soulmate was allowed to believe. And for a while, your soulmate accepted that structure without realizing how much power they had given away. They thought they were receiving guidance. They thought they were receiving wisdom. But now they are seeing that this so-called guidance always arrived at the exact moment your connection was about to move forward. And that timing is what they can no longer explain away. Just before communication could return, something happened. Just after an emotional breakthrough, the third party suddenly needed attention. Just when your soulmate felt their heart softening toward you, a new concern appeared. A new warning. A new emotional crisis. A new reason to pause. And at first, your soulmate saw these moments separately. They thought each one had its own explanation. They thought the interruptions were coincidences. But now, when they place those memories side by side, the pattern becomes too precise to dismiss. This is the part that makes everything start making sense. The third party was strongest when peace was closest. They became loud when honesty was near. They became wounded when your soulmate started feeling sure. They became urgent when your soulmate started calming down. And now your soulmate is realizing that the third party did not need to destroy the connection all at once. They only needed to interrupt it at the right time over and over again. That is why the Emperor feels so important here. It shows the control center, the place where someone tried to rule the emotional outcome. Someone wanted to be the gatekeeper between your soulmate and the truth. Someone wanted their version of reality to sit above everything else. Above your soulmate's feelings, above your actions, above the connection itself. But the throne is shaking now. Your soulmate is seeing that real authority does not panic when someone thinks for themselves. Real care does not create emergencies every time love gets close. Real protection does not need constant control to survive. And now your soulmate is beginning to see the third party's greatest fear, not being exposed publicly, losing the power to shape the story. And that is exactly why the Ten of Wands reversed is showing up here with such clear symbolism. Not as fortune-telling, not as a prediction, but as the image of a burden becoming too heavy to keep carrying, especially when that burden was built out of pressure, hidden responsibility, and a story that someone tried to hold together by force. Upright, this card can speak to carrying too much. Carrying weight that becomes exhausting. But reversed, something begins to drop. Something slips. Something can no longer be held in the same way. And that is what is happening to the third party's control. They are trying to carry the same story, but the weight of it is turning against them. They are trying to keep every detail in place, but your soulmate is no longer cooperating with the illusion. And once your soulmate stops automatically believing them, the whole performance becomes harder to maintain. The third party has to explain more, defend more, react faster, cover one statement with another statement, create new emotion to distract from the old inconsistency. And every time they do that, they reveal more of what they were trying to hide. This is where the narrative starts slipping out of their hands. Because before, they could say one thing and your soulmate would fill in the blanks for them. Before, they could act hurt and your soulmate would soften. Before, they could create urgency and your soulmate would stop asking questions. But now, your soulmate is not moving the same way. They are pausing. They are listening. They are letting the silence sit there long enough for the third party to expose themselves. And listen carefully, because truth is not chasing this person. Truth is not screaming. Truth is not fighting for attention. Truth is simply standing still while the lie becomes too heavy to hold. The third party is the one scrambling. The third party is the one trying harder. The third party is the one over-explaining, becoming emotional, pushing new distractions, trying to make your soulmate feel responsible for their discomfort. But it is not working the way it used to. The Ten of Wands reversed shows the collapse of forced effort. The burden is coming down. The act is becoming exhausting. And your soulmate can feel that this is not just exposure. This is release. Release from carrying someone else's version of reality. Release from defending confusion. Release from blaming the connection for chaos that was brought in from the outside. And now this exposure is leading your soulmate to one final realization about you. About what this connection truly was before someone tried to bury it under fear. And that is why the Six of Cups arrives here with such emotional weight. Not as fortune-telling. Not as a promise of what must happen next. But as a symbol of memory, innocence, emotional history, and the part of the connection that existed before confusion touched it. This card brings your soulmate back to something softer, something older, something they could not fully erase, even when they tried to believe the version of you that someone else handed them. Because now, when they think of you, they are not only remembering the conflict, they are remembering the warmth. They are remembering the way their spirit recognized yours before fear became loud. They are remembering small moments that did not feel forced. Moments where the connection felt simple, honest, and strangely familiar. And that is what the third party could not stand. They could not control something that reached your soulmate in a place deeper than logic. They could not compete with something that did not need constant explanation to feel real. And listen, this is where the truth becomes deeply personal for your soulmate. They are beginning to realize that you were not the source of the chaos. The chaos surrounded the connection because someone else feared what the connection represented. You were not the reason everything became heavy. You were the person they were guided away from when the truth started getting too close. And that changes the meaning of everything. It changes the silence. It changes the separation. It changes the moments where they thought distance was clarity. when really distance may have been the result of pressure. It changes the way they remember your reactions, your emotions, your attempts to be understood. What once looked like intensity may now look like pain. What once looked like suspicion may now look like intuition. What once looked like conflict may now look like someone trying to speak through a fog they did not create. And this does not erase what happened. It does not wipe away the hurt. It does not pretend your heart did not feel the weight of being misunderstood. But it clears something from your energy. It removes the false blame. It reveals that the connection was never weak because it struggled. It was attacked because it mattered. It was challenged because it awakened something. It was surrounded by resistance because someone knew that if your soulmate saw it clearly, they might never be able to look away again. The Six of Cups shows the memory returning clean, not perfect, not untouched by pain, but real. And your soulmate is finally seeing that what they were told to doubt may have been the very thing their heart was trying to protect. And now that they can no longer unsee the truth, the next question is not whether the third party has been exposed. The next question is what your soulmate will do with the truth now that it is staring back at them.